My spoiled sister stole my grandmother's $42,000 diamond necklace. My parents covered for her. Then Uncle Marcus arrived with a baseball bat and a grim expression. The silence was deafening. She took my inheritance, looked me straight in the eye, and claimed she deserved it more than I did. My parents said I was being selfish. But when my 65-year-old uncle, a former Marine drill sergeant, walked in gripping that Louisville slugger with murder in his eyes, you could hear a pin drop. This wasn't just about jewelry anymore. It was about honor legacy and standing up for what's right, even if it meant destroying everything we once called family. My name is Alexander. I'm 28 years old and work as a financial analyst in Austin, Texas. I live in a 3-bedroom ranch house that I purchased 2 years ago after saving every penny from my job at a downtown investment firm. I share this home with my Uncle Marcus, my father's younger brother. Uncle Marcus is 65, but built like a tank, all muscle and discipline from his 20 years in the Marines. He's got zero tolerance for dishonesty and has always been my strongest supporter and role model. Uncle Marcus and I have an unbreakable bond. He taught me everything about integrity, hard work, and standing up for yourself when the world tries to knock you down. Until recently, my parents and younger sister Scarlett also lived here. But after a devastating family crisis exactly 8 months ago, I had to make the hardest decision of my life. My story begins 8 months ago on a sweltering August afternoon. I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office when my phone rang. Uncle Marcus's name flashed on the screen, and I could immediately tell something was wrong from his urgent tone. "Alex, I just caught Scarlett coming out of your room with something in her hands. Looked like jewelry." My blood ran cold. I thanked him and hung up my hands, shaking as I opened our home security app. What I saw on the footage made my stomach drop to the floor. There was Scarlett, clear as day, sneaking into my bedroom and going straight to the antique jewelry box on my dresser. She carefully removed my grandmother's diamond necklace, a family heirloom worth $40,000 that Grandma Rose had specifically left to me in her will just 6 months earlier. It wasn't just about money. That necklace represented 4 generations of family history, and Grandma Rose had chosen me because I was the only one who truly appreciated family traditions and heritage. As I watched the security footage, another detail hit me hard. I had forgotten to lock my bedroom door that morning, something I always did since my family moved in. One careless moment had given Scarlett the opportunity she'd been waiting for. Sitting in my office cubicle, I felt torn apart. The evidence was crystal clear, but part of me desperately hoped there was some explanation, some misunderstanding. I considered calling the police immediately, but decided to wait until I got home. Maybe she would return it, and we could handle this as a family. I spent the rest of the workday in agony, unable to concentrate on anything except what I'd seen on that screen. When I finally rushed home at 5:30, only Uncle Marcus was there. My parents and Scarlett hadn't returned from their shopping trip yet. I ran upstairs to my room, praying I had misunderstood what I'd seen. But when I opened the jewelry box, the devastating truth stared back at me. Grandma Rose's necklace was gone. Rage and heartbreak crashed over me simultaneously. This wasn't just theft. It was a betrayal of everything our grandmother stood for. The necklace had been in our family since the 1920s, passed down from mother to daughter. And Grandma Rose had broken tradition to give it to me because she trusted me to preserve the family legacy. I remembered Scarlett's jealous reaction when the will was read. She'd complained bitterly that I didn't deserve it, that jewelry should go to women, not men. I tried to explain that I planned to pass it to my future daughter someday, but she wouldn't listen. Her resentment had been obvious for months. To understand how this catastrophe happened, you need to know about my family dynamics. My father, William Chen, is 52 and works as a middle management accountant. He makes decent money, but has terrible spending habits and no savings discipline. My mother, Patricia Chen, is 49 and works part-time at a local art gallery. Her income barely covers gas money. Then there's my sister, Scarlett Chen. She was 24 at the time and had just graduated from college with a degree she'd never use. Scarlett had been spoiled rotten her entire life, developing an entitled attitude and an obsession with expensive designer goods. Anything trendy or luxurious immediately caught her attention, and somehow became something she needed. In early 2024, my parents lost their life savings in a cryptocurrency scam. They were forced to sell their house to avoid bankruptcy and had nowhere to go. When they came to me begging for help, I initially refused. I knew letting them move in would disrupt my peaceful life with Uncle Marcus, but they played their ace card. They reminded me that Uncle Marcus was living with them at the time, and the thought of my mentor being homeless broke my resolve. I agreed to let the whole family move in rent-free, thinking it would be temporary while they got back on their feet. At first, everything seemed manageable. We divided household chores fairly and coexisted peacefully. But cracks began showing quickly. Scarlett started asking for money constantly, first for job interview clothes, then for networking events, then for basic necessities. I helped her because I wanted to support family, but she never paid me back. Whenever I brought up repayment, she'd deflect and change the subject. When I pressed harder, my parents would intervene with their usual refrain: family members should support each other unconditionally. They constantly made excuses for her, making me feel guilty for expecting basic responsibility. Things escalated when Scarlett started borrowing my belongings without asking. First my laptop charger, then my Bluetooth headphones, then my leather jacket. She always had convenient explanations and promised to return things, but never did. The situation reached a breaking point about a month before the necklace incident. Scarlett had been asking detailed questions about Grandma Rose's jewelry collection, especially the diamond necklace. Her eyes lit up with that familiar greedy gleam whenever she looked at it. After that conversation, I installed a hidden camera in my bedroom, pointed directly at the dresser. I never imagined that camera would capture the evidence that would tear our family apart. Around 6:15 p.m., I heard the front door open and my parents' voices in the hallway. Scarlett walked in a few minutes later, timing her entrance perfectly to avoid suspicion. When they all gathered in the living room, they were surprised to see Uncle Marcus and me sitting there waiting with serious expressions. Normally, I'd be in my room relaxing or taking a shower at that time. I asked everyone to sit down because we needed to discuss something important. The atmosphere immediately grew tense. Uncle Marcus sat in his usual recliner, studying everyone with his penetrating gaze that could see through any lie. I looked each of them in the eye and asked calmly, "Grandma Rose's diamond necklace is missing from my room. Does anyone know anything about it?" Scarlett's reaction was theatrical and obviously fake. "What? That's terrible. Are you sure you didn't just move it somewhere?" My parents joined in, seeming genuinely concerned, as if they were actually upset about the loss. Mom asked, "Are you certain it's gone? Maybe you put it in a different drawer," Dad suggested. "Could it be at the bank in your safety deposit box?" Something about their responses felt rehearsed and artificial. I watched them carefully, then locked eyes with Scarlett again. "You're absolutely sure you don't know anything about this?" She clung to her lie, trying to appear offended. "Why would you accuse me? I would never take your things, Alex." Dad immediately jumped to her defense. "How can you suspect, Scarlett? That's ridiculous." That's when I decided to stop playing games. I slowly pulled out my phone and opened the security app. The room fell completely silent. I looked at Scarlett one more time, my voice calm but firm. "Then explain this." I turned the phone around and pressed play. The screen showed crystal clear footage of Scarlett entering my room at exactly 2:45 p.m. that afternoon and deliberately taking the necklace from the jewelry box. Even with undeniable video evidence, Scarlett tried to lie her way out. "I was just looking at it," she stammered. "I was going to put it back." This pathetic excuse made my blood boil. I fast-forwarded through the footage, showing her carefully closing the jewelry box and hiding the necklace in her purse. "Looking at it," I asked, my voice turning ice cold. "Then why did you put it in your purse and leave the house with it?" Instead of letting her answer, my parents immediately rushed to defend their precious daughter. Mom quickly spoke up. "Scarlett probably just wanted to borrow it for something special. She didn't mean any harm, honey." Dad also chimed in, acting like I was overreacting. "This is a family matter, Alex. There's no need to make such a big deal out of it." Hearing them mindlessly defend Scarlett caused something inside me to snap. I exploded. Borrowing without permission, sneaking into someone's room, and taking their most precious possession. That's called theft. Scarlett burst into tears as soon as she realized she was caught. I just wanted to wear it to Sarah's wedding this weekend. I wasn't going to keep it forever. Of course, the moment their baby started crying, my parents rushed to comfort her like clockwork. Dad quickly said, "See? She just wanted to borrow it for an important event. Don't blow this out of proportion." At the height of the tension, Uncle Marcus, who had been silently observing everything, spoke up. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute authority. 24 years old and still doesn't understand the difference between right and wrong. That statement hit the room like a thunderbolt. Everyone went silent. I seized the moment and made my final offer. I stared Scarlett directly in the eyes and said, "Give me the necklace back right now and I'll let this go." Instead of showing remorse, Scarlett snapped back, her voice defiant and stubborn. "I told you I was planning to return it after the wedding. God, Alex, you're so paranoid." That was it. My last thread of patience snapped. My voice was firm, final, and loud enough to make everyone freeze. "Return it immediately, or I'm calling the police." That threat hit like a bomb. For the first time, everyone realized I wasn't bluffing. When they could no longer deny the evidence, and I threatened to involve law enforcement, my entire family seemed to collectively shift tactics, using emotional manipulation to guilt-trip me. Dad responded in a tone suggesting I was overreacting. "Alex, don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Scarlett was going to return it after one event." Mom added her own moral lecture. Family is supposed to stick together, not threaten each other with police. When Scarlett saw her parents protecting her, she started sobbing and said in a voice that made me sound like the cruel one, "It's just jewelry, Alex. Why are you trying to ruin my life over this?" Dad escalated the guilt trip, sensing this approach might work. "Sharing is normal in families, Alex. What you're doing is tearing this family apart." Hearing all of this felt like being attacked by a swarm of wasps. They were trying to paint me as the villain, as if I was heartless and selfish for demanding what was legally and morally mine. While everyone argued, I noticed Uncle Marcus still sitting quietly in his chair, watching every word and gesture. But the look in his eyes and his white-knuckled grip on the armrests told me everything. He was furious beyond words. Uncle Marcus had never been one to show emotion easily, but watching his niece steal and then be defended and justified by her parents had pushed him past his breaking point. I knew he would find this behavior completely unacceptable. With everything he'd seen and experienced in the military, he understood the difference between genuine love and toxic enabling. The air in the living room grew heavier, and it hit me hard. I was standing alone against my entire family as they tried to make theft seem trivial. Uncle Marcus said nothing more after witnessing Scarlett's stubbornness and my parents' defense of her actions. He suddenly stood up from his chair and walked out of the living room without saying a word. His movements were slow but purposeful, with an intensity that everyone could feel crackling in the air. I watched him head straight for the garage, then to the storage area where he kept his old military gear. A cold dread began forming in my chest, as if something catastrophic was about to happen. Meanwhile, my parents and Scarlett continued arguing with me, oblivious to the fact that Uncle Marcus had left the room. They just kept repeating the same justifications and platitudes about family and forgiveness, as if saying them enough times would somehow make theft acceptable. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was exhausted. Not only was the necklace gone, but my family was twisting reality to make me look like the bad guy for simply wanting what belonged to me. Heavy footsteps echoed from the garage about 5 minutes later. As the argument continued to heat up, there was something ominous about the sound that made everyone stop talking and look around. Then Uncle Marcus walked back in, and what we saw shocked the entire room into silence. He was holding his old Marine-issued baseball bat, solid ashwood that he'd kept from his days coaching the base team. His expression was stone-cold serious. His eyes were focused and deadly calm as they moved from person to person. He didn't say a word, didn't make a single gesture to explain himself. He just stood there gripping that bat. The living room fell into complete suffocating silence. Nobody dared to breathe loudly. Nobody moved a muscle. The only sound was the ticking of the wall clock echoing through a room so tense that the air itself seemed to stop moving. When they saw Uncle Marcus standing there with that bat in his hands, my entire family froze like deer in headlights. Nobody could process what we were witnessing. Dad stammered, his voice shaking with fear. "Marcus, what are you doing with that?" But Uncle Marcus didn't respond. He just started walking slowly toward the front door. Each step was heavy measured and carried a terrifying sense of purpose. We followed him like zombies, saying nothing, and moving only when instinct compelled us to. Outside in the driveway sat two vehicles, my parents' blue Honda Accord and Scarlett's white Nissan Altima. Then Uncle Marcus began to act. He walked up to the Honda and, without warning, swung the bat with devastating precision into the front windshield. The glass spiderwebbed instantly with a sound like a gunshot. Mom screamed in horror. "Marcus, stop! What are you doing?" But Uncle Marcus didn't flinch. He moved methodically around the car, smashing every window with the cold efficiency of a professional demolition expert. Then he moved to Scarlett's Altima and continued his systematic destruction. Scarlett shrieked between sobs. "Uncle Marcus, please stop! That's my car! I need it for job interviews!" Dad, now in full panic mode, rushed forward to stop him. "Marcus, please. We can talk this through like adults." That's when Uncle Marcus paused. He slowly turned to face his older brother, my father. His eyes were colder than Arctic ice. The entire driveway became absolutely silent, except for the sound of glass shards settling on concrete. With a voice like steel, Uncle Marcus asked, "In this family, taking each other's things without permission is normal, right?" Everyone held their breath. Dad had used similar logic just minutes earlier to justify Scarlett's actions. After several seconds of uncomfortable silence, Uncle Marcus looked around at everyone with rage burning in his eyes. "Then these two cars belong to me now. I can do whatever I want with them." With that, he gripped the bat tighter and prepared for another swing. That single gesture sent my entire family into complete hysteria. When Dad and Scarlett saw Uncle Marcus raising the bat again, they both cried out in terror. Dad shouted, his voice cracking with fear. "Marcus, please don't! We were wrong! I'm sorry!" Scarlett wailed hysterically. Her voice choked with panic. "Uncle Marcus, please don't destroy my car! I'm sorry, I know I messed up." But Uncle Marcus stood there, stone-faced and unmoved. He slowly raised the bat above his head, preparing for another devastating blow. At that moment, time seemed to freeze completely. Then he barked, "Get on your knees!" Dad and Scarlett froze stunned. They stared at him with wide eyes of disbelief, as if they couldn't process that this 65-year-old man had just given them such a command. Seeing them still standing there, paralyzed Uncle Marcus roared again, louder and sharper. "I said, get on your knees!" The command hit like a sledgehammer. Dad William Chen, who had always considered himself the head of the household, dropped to his knees on the cold concrete driveway. His hands were trembling. His voice was broken. "I'm sorry, Marcus. I know I was wrong." Scarlett remained standing, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Uncle Marcus turned to her, his gaze cold and merciless. "Not kneeling, fine. Then say goodbye to your car." He moved the bat closer to her driver's side window, just inches away from delivering another crushing blow. Scarlett was so terrified she nearly collapsed. She dropped to her knees beside Dad, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. Mom stood back silently crying and frozen with fear. She didn't dare move closer, understanding that Uncle Marcus had entered a state beyond anyone's ability to predict or control. Uncle Marcus looked down at Dad, who was kneeling on the ground, and his expression was as harsh as a judge delivering a death sentence. In a voice cold as steel, he asked, "William, do you even know how to be a father?" Dad bowed his head, unable to meet his younger brother's eyes. In a quiet, ashamed voice, he replied, "I know I failed, Marcus. I didn't raise Scarlett properly." Uncle Marcus nodded slowly and issued a command that left no room for argument. "Then tell your daughter to return the necklace and apologize to Alex, now." Without hesitation, Dad turned to Scarlett, his voice shaking but forceful. "You need to give the necklace back to Alex and apologize, sincerely. No more excuses or justifications." What I was witnessing felt surreal and nightmarish. My father and sister were on their knees before Uncle Marcus, surrounded by shattered glass, and the smell of fear hanging in the evening air. Even while kneeling on the cold concrete, Scarlett hesitated to fully admit her wrongdoing. Instead of showing genuine remorse, she continued trying to justify her actions. "It's just jewelry," she said in a defensive tone. "Does it really have to be this serious?" Hearing that made Uncle Marcus's face turn bright red with fury. His eyes blazed like fire, showing a rage I had rarely seen in him during all our years together. He shouted, "What, you're still arguing? Even now you don't understand that you're wrong." Then he raised the bat, as if preparing to deliver another devastating blow. Dad, now in absolute terror, nearly screamed, "Scarlett, apologize to Alex right now. Stop arguing and take responsibility." But Scarlett remained stubborn to the bitter end. Her voice shook with fear, but remained defiant. "I didn't do anything that terrible. I was borrowing it. I was going to give it back after the wedding." Watching this unfold, I could see Uncle Marcus's rage reaching a boiling point. His hands gripping the bat were trembling, not from fear, but from barely contained fury. In an ice-cold tone, he said, 24 years old, and you still can't tell right from wrong. You steal and then try to argue your way out of it." Then he stared directly at Scarlett, his voice filled with contempt. "Someone like you doesn't deserve to live in this house." Scarlett burst into tears again as Uncle Marcus condemned her behavior. Despite her desperation, she tried one last time to shift blame. "You're just taking Alex's side because you like him better. You're not being fair to me." And that was the final straw. Uncle Marcus had completely run out of patience. He raised the bat for what looked like a finishing blow, but just then the wail of police sirens pierced the air, growing louder as they approached our street. The sirens struck like lightning in the middle of our storm. Everyone turned to look down the road where 2 patrol cars were racing toward our house. A police cruiser had been driving through our neighborhood when it stopped abruptly after spotting our bizarre scene. The officers must have been alerted by the noise and the unusual sight in our driveway. People kneeling on the ground, shattered glass everywhere, and the strong tension they could sense even from a distance. 2 officers quickly jumped out of their vehicle, hands positioned near their radios, ready to call for backup if necessary. As they approached our group, the senior officer called out, "What's going on here?" The moment they noticed the destroyed vehicles, the baseball bat in Uncle Marcus's hands, and 2 adults kneeling on the concrete, their demeanor shifted immediately. Both officers went into high alert mode. The senior officer gave a firm command, "Sir, please put the bat down on the ground, now." Without complaint, Uncle Marcus slowly bent down and carefully placed the bat on the driveway, well away from everyone else. After the immediate threat was controlled, the second officer approached us and asked, "Can someone explain what exactly happened here?" Dad and Scarlett were still kneeling, too scared to move without Uncle Marcus's permission. They just looked up with pleading eyes, hoping someone else would handle the situation. I stepped forward and addressed the officers clearly. "Officer, my sister stole my grandmother's $40,000 diamond necklace. I have clear security camera footage as evidence of the theft." Following my explanation, the senior officer looked down at Scarlett, still on her knees, and asked, "Ma'am, can you confirm this story?" Scarlett replied through tears and trembling, "I was just borrowing it for a wedding. I wasn't really stealing. I was going to return it after the weekend." Upon hearing this, the senior officer shook his head and calmly explained, "Taking someone's property without permission is considered theft under the law, regardless of intent." The second officer added, "And with something valued at 40,000, we're looking at a serious felony offense." Then Uncle Marcus spoke up, his voice calm but absolutely firm. "Alex, press charges. Let her learn what it means to respect other people's property and face real consequences." His words landed like a bomb. My entire family was shocked into silence. Mom covered her mouth in horror. Dad looked up in disbelief. Scarlett sobbed as if her entire world had just crumbled around her. After hearing the complete story, one of the officers approached me and asked, "Do you want to file an official theft report for this incident?" That question cut through the tension like a razor blade. My parents stared at me with desperate, pleading eyes, as if my next words would determine their entire future. Mom broke down and begged, "Alex, please don't do this to Scarlett. I'm begging you as your mother." Without waiting, Dad chimed in, his voice shaking with desperation. Think about Scarlett's future son. You can't destroy your sister's life over this." But instead of showing remorse, Scarlett exploded in anger, shouting, "You can't do this to me! I'm your sister! Family doesn't treat family this way!" Even at this critical moment, her defiance ignited a fire within me. I looked the officer directly in the eye, and said with absolute certainty, "Yes, I want to file an official theft report." My words landed like a death sentence. My entire family was stunned, frozen in amazement that I had actually gone through with it. Without hesitation, the officer nodded professionally and said, "All right, we'll begin documenting everything and proceed with the necessary legal steps." As soon as he said that, Uncle Marcus smiled quietly and told me, "That's right, Alex. Actions have consequences. You can't let thieves walk away without facing justice." His words hit like a final verdict, confirming that my decision was absolutely correct. While my parents and Scarlett remained stunned and speechless, I felt an unexpected wave of relief wash over me. Justice was finally being served. At that moment, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My family would never be the same again, but that was the price I was willing to pay to stand up for what was right. After I confirmed that I wanted to file the report, the two officers began documenting the case with professional efficiency. They took out notepads and a digital recorder, planning to document every detail of the incident. When they asked about the security footage, I pulled out my phone and showed them the crystal-clear video. The evidence showed Scarlett entering my room and stealing the necklace, undeniable high-resolution proof. After reviewing the footage and confirming the evidence was solid, the senior officer approached Scarlett with handcuffs. She was still kneeling and trembling on the concrete. The officer spoke firmly, "Scarlett Chen, you are under arrest for theft of high-value property." Then he began reading her Miranda rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Scarlett burst into hysterical tears as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. She turned to me and screamed, "Alex, please don't let them do this!" She begged with pure desperation, "Just give me one more chance. I'll return the necklace. I'll never take anything again. I promise this time." Unfortunately, it was too late. The officers had completed the arrest procedure and were preparing to escort her to their patrol car. My parents panicked when they saw their daughter being led away and chased after the police vehicle. Mom cried out, pleading desperately, "Please, officers, she's just a confused young woman. Please give her another chance." To help them understand the severity, one of the officers patiently explained, "Theft of property valued over $5,000 is classified as a felony under Texas state law." He continued, "She could face anywhere from 2 to 10 years in prison, depending on her criminal history and the court's decision." When Mom heard that, she collapsed to the ground as if struck by lightning, sobbing uncontrollably. She couldn't bear watching her daughter in handcuffs being placed into the back of a police car. Dad rushed to help her up, then turned back to me, his face twisted with anger and accusation. "Are you happy now, Alex? You got exactly what you wanted." I remained silent, but he continued ranting. "You've destroyed this family. Are you satisfied now?" Before I could respond, Uncle Marcus stepped forward and spoke for me, his voice hard and uncompromising. "Alex didn't destroy this family. Scarlett did with her choices. She made her bed." Uncle Marcus's words were the final judgment, an absolute declaration of who was truly responsible for this disaster. After Scarlett was taken away, and the police cars drove off into the night, we stood in front of the house in haunting silence. The air still carried the sharp smell of fear and shattered glass, and nobody's tears had dried completely. Standing tall in front of my parents, I looked them both in the eye and spoke with absolute firmness. "After what happened today, I'm asking both of you to leave this house. You have 30 days starting right now." My parents were absolutely stunned, frozen with shock and disbelief. They stood there like statues, mouths hanging open, and completely speechless. Then Dad exploded, shouting in fury, "You're kicking out your own father! Have you completely lost your mind and heart?" I didn't let emotions influence my decision. I continued calmly, "In the next 3 days you'll receive formal eviction notice through certified mail from my attorney." Hearing this, Mom collapsed to the ground, pleading through broken sobs. "Please, son, I'm begging you, don't do this to us." but I remained absolutely solid in my resolve. I informed them clearly, "You've lived here rent-free for 8 months. No bills, no responsibilities, no contributions. And instead of being grateful, you defended a thief and tried to make me the villain for wanting my own inheritance back. I can't live with people who don't understand basic right from wrong." Hearing those words, Dad's face went pale with rage and shock. He pointed his trembling finger at me and said through gritted teeth, "You'll regret this decision, Alex. Mark my words." But no matter how much they screamed, cried, or threatened me, I didn't back down even an inch. Uncle Marcus stood there beside me, saying nothing but radiating strength. His presence was louder than words. He stood next to me like an unshakable tower of support, silently confirming that I was doing the absolutely right thing. When my parents saw that I would not back down or change my mind, they turned to their final desperate tactic, begging Uncle Marcus to intervene on their behalf. In complete desperation, Dad went to his knees before his younger brother and pleaded, "Marcus, please, I'm begging you as your brother. Talk to Alex. Make him reconsider." Mom then knelt alongside him, crying and begging pathetically, "We know we made terrible mistakes. Please give us one chance to make things right with the family." Uncle Marcus gazed down at the two people kneeling before him. His expression was completely blank and emotionless. There was no trace of sympathy, pity, or familial affection. His eyes were ice cold, as if he were looking at complete strangers. After a long, uncomfortable silence, he spoke. His voice was sharp and completely emotionless. "You had 8 months to show who you really were, and you chose to defend a thief instead of standing up for truth and justice. Now you want forgiveness and second chances. It's too late for that." That single statement was the final judgment, a door slammed shut forever. My parents' last hope was completely extinguished. The next 30 days were the most tense and uncomfortable period this house had ever experienced. The atmosphere was so heavy and oppressive, you could cut through it with a knife. My parents struggled desperately to find a new place to live, constantly challenged by their limited finances and poor credit history. Renting in Austin with its sky-high prices forced them to look at increasingly cheaper and more run-down alternatives. During that period, Scarlett was released on bail under my parents' supervision while awaiting her trial date. They scraped together enough money to rent her a tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood until her court appearance. After meeting with a defense attorney, they were told bluntly and honestly, "With such clear security footage evidence, Scarlett has virtually no chance of avoiding conviction. The best we can hope for is a plea bargain for reduced sentencing." My parents' attitude changed dramatically during those 30 days. The arrogance and entitlement they had previously displayed completely evaporated. They became quiet and subdued, as if walking on eggshells in what was no longer their home. What stood out most was that they couldn't look Uncle Marcus or me in the eyes anymore. When we crossed paths in the house, they would bow their heads and quickly move away like scolded children. Mom began preparing elaborate meals for Uncle Marcus in an obvious attempt at a late apology and to improve the situation. Dad also started asking about Uncle Marcus's health and well-being, stumbling through awkward small talk like a man who had forgotten how to communicate with his own brother. But Uncle Marcus remained completely unmoved by their efforts. He said coldly, "Now you remember respect and gratitude. Now that you've been told to leave suddenly, you feel remorse." Throughout it all, I felt a strange but peaceful sense of relief. It wasn't easy to evict my own parents, but it was absolutely the right decision, and I don't regret it for a single second. One quiet Saturday evening, Uncle Marcus and I sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in brilliant colors. He suddenly turned to face me, and his eyes held a warmth I hadn't seen in a long time. He gently placed a strong hand on my shoulder and whispered in a voice filled with emotion, "I'm proud of you, Alex. So incredibly proud." At that moment, my throat tightened with emotion. Praise from Uncle Marcus, the man I admired and respected more than anyone else in the world, meant more than anything else could possibly mean. The 30th day finally arrived with a sense of finality. The sounds of packing and moving echoed throughout the house starting early in the morning. My parents were finishing up their preparations and gathering their remaining possessions. After weeks of searching, they had finally found a small apartment in a less desirable part of Austin, much farther from their familiar surroundings, and far from the comforts they had enjoyed in this house. The mood in the house that day was oppressively quiet and strained. Nobody dared to raise their voice above a whisper. Every movement was careful, measured, and almost fragile. As Mom walked through the room she had called home for the past 8 months, she stopped at the doorway. I noticed her shoulders shaking as she tried to control her emotions. Tears fell slowly at first, then more steadily. She stood there quietly, staring at the now empty room, as if trying to memorize every detail of what was once her sanctuary. In that moment, a complex emotion surged through my chest. Not regret, but a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Uncle Marcus stood silently near the living room doorway during the entire moving process. He didn't say anything, just observed everything with a calm, unreadable expression. You couldn't tell what thoughts were going through his mind. Finally, the last moving truck was loaded and drove away slowly. The sound of its engine faded gradually down the street, leaving behind an almost dreamlike quiet and peace. As we stood there watching the truck disappear in the distance, Uncle Marcus took a deep breath and murmured quietly, "Finally, this house has peace again." Hearing him say that, I felt a tremendous weight lift off my shoulders. The house now belonged to just the two of us, two people who understood and respected each other completely. I knew right then that I had made the absolutely correct decision, no matter how difficult it had been. The official trial began 3 months after Scarlett's arrest. She was charged with felony grand theft in the Travis County Courthouse. Uncle Marcus and I attended court as key witnesses. Scarlett's defense attorney did everything possible to minimize the severity of the charges. He stood before the judge and argued, "Your Honor, the defendant is only 24 years old, still very young and learning. This may have been a youthful mistake, not something that should destroy her entire future." But the prosecutor wasn't going to let it slide. She presented the security footage and delivered a powerful, convincing argument to the court. The prosecutor stated clearly, "Your Honor, this was not a momentary lapses in judgment or an impulsive mistake. The defendant planned this theft, waited until the house was empty, and deliberately entered a private bedroom to steal the most valuable items she could find. She knew exactly what that necklace was worth and actively attempted to conceal her actions afterward. When the court asked for Scarlett's response, she made a weak attempt to defend herself. "I just meant to borrow it for one special event. I didn't mean to steal it permanently." The judge looked directly at her and asked, "Then why didn't you ask your brother for permission before taking it?" Scarlett fell silent. She didn't have an answer to that simple, logical question. The judge then asked what she had done with the necklace. At that point, Scarlett had to admit the painful truth that sealed her fate. "I sold it and got $18,000. I used the money to pay off my credit card debts and some money I owed friends. I had been spending way beyond my means for months." After considering all the evidence and testimony, the court issued its final verdict. The judge stated solemnly, "This court sentences the defendant Scarlett Chen to 24 months in state prison." He added, "The defendant must also pay $48,000 in restitution to her brother Alexander Chen, representing the full value of the stolen necklace, plus $5,000 in court cost and legal fees." As the sentence was pronounced, my parents sobbed openly in the courtroom. Their cries were filled with genuine anguish, but they could do nothing to change the outcome. As for me, I sat there and felt an unexpected sense of calm wash over me. Justice had finally been served fairly and completely. Beside me, Uncle Marcus leaned over and whispered, "That's exactly right, son. There have to be real consequences for wrong actions. It's the only way people truly learn respect and responsibility." It's been exactly 10 months since the diamond necklace incident and all the chaos that followed in its wake. Today, Uncle Marcus and I live in peace, stability, and genuine happiness. On the professional front, I received a promotion to senior financial analyst at my firm, and my salary has increased substantially. Uncle Marcus remains in excellent health for his age. He wakes up early every morning, reads the newspaper cover to cover, and tends to his small vegetable garden in the backyard. We have long, meaningful conversations every evening, and I value his wisdom and guidance more with each passing day. My parents still contact me occasionally, but our relationship has never recovered, and probably never will. The phone calls are brief, polite, and emotionally distant. I still respect them as the people who gave me life, but the trust and closeness we once shared are gone forever. Scarlett is still serving her 24-month sentence in state prison. I have never visited her, never attempted to contact her, and have no plans to do so in the future. Some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. My story about the diamond necklace and everything that followed ends here. I'm not sharing this story to gain sympathy or seek validation, and I'm certainly not telling it to publicly shame my family members. I'm sharing it because of a profound lesson I've learned through this painful experience. Sometimes true love doesn't mean tolerating and excusing every mistake and bad decision. Sometimes true love means setting clear boundaries and allowing people to face the natural consequences of their choices and actions. And most importantly, I want you to understand that family isn't defined solely by blood relations and DNA. Real family consists of people who respect you, support you unconditionally, and stand by you when you need them most, just like Uncle Marcus did for me when it mattered most. Story 2. Hello everyone! I apologize for disturbing your viewing, but kindly like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you! From the delicate fairy lights that were tastefully strung across the lawn to the exquisitely placed bouquets of white lilies that adorned each table, I have spent weeks painstakingly organizing my engagement party with Chris. I was meant to have tonight, the night when I would finally be the center of attention. Olivia's brilliant personality cast a shadow over Rebecca Harris, the timid sister who was often ignored. As we stood in front of our guests, champagne flutes raised in the air, getting ready to make our announcement, Chris gave me a comforting grip on my hand, and his soft smile steadied me, a recognizable clinking sound. Olivia's knife tapping persistently against her crystal glass filled the air as Chris opened his lips to speak. As soon as my sister, who was naturally beautiful in her bright red dress, got up from her chair, a familiar uneasiness began to creep into my chest. She had a naughty twinkle in her eyes. I was all too familiar. My accomplishments since infancy have been eclipsed by the same light-hearted disobedience. Olivia said, "I'm sorry to interrupt your little moment," taking a theatrical pause to ensure she had everyone's full attention. "However, I have some really exciting news about Jason. I have a baby!" Around us gasps were heard, quickly followed by shouts, clapping, and happy laughing from friends and family who had turned their focus from my well-planned celebration to Olivia's unannounced news. The corners of her mouth curled upward into that recognizable grin as she turned to face me. "Sorry," she replied, her voice brimming with false regret. I guess I took center stage once more. The crowd erupted in laughter. My parents' happiness was evident and dazzlingly brilliant as they embraced Olivia with a big smile. Nevertheless, Chris and I remained motionless alone in the sphere of incredulity and annoyance that surrounded us. Impermeable, yet invisible. My meticulously planned moment, which was meant to finally legitimize years of silent sacrifices and underappreciated accomplishments, vanished in a matter of seconds as Olivia's easy charm engulfed me. I felt like an afterthought at my own celebration, because even Chris's mother hurried up to congratulate Olivia first. As the laughing erupted all around me, memories suddenly flooded my head, bringing back every instance from the past. This was exactly what Olivia had done. Olivia's entrance to her esteemed institution eclipsed my high school graduation, and the enthusiasm around her unexpected engagement announcement overshadowed my first art display. Even when I got my ideal job, Olivia's new house soon became the topic of talk at dinner. She subtly dominated my life, and this engagement party was just one more link in a lengthy chain. Chris tightened his grip on my hand once more, bringing me back to the here and now. His subdued rage reflected mine, his serene exterior barely masking the annoyance that burned behind his kind front. He leaned near his breath, warm on my cheek, whispering, "Give her this moment. We'll have ours soon enough." I felt the old animosity twisting uncomfortably within of me as I gazed at Olivia, beguiling everyone around her with ease and surrounded by admirers. Why did she have to take what should have been mine every time? What about my accomplishments and my joy that she just couldn't let show without her having to overshadow me? However, as my rage increased, a subtle yet potent notion kept creeping into my mind. It was subdued, graceful, but unquestionably powerful, the type of retaliation that would damage Olivia's dignity while seeming totally harmless to onlookers. With my voice calm despite the excitement pumping through my veins, I edged closer to Chris. My lips curled into a smile as I muttered, "Let's send out the save the dates tomorrow." For once, the smile matched Olivia's self-assured smirk. "Let's alter them, though. Let's make sure Olivia knows what it's like to be overshadowed at last." As if he had been waiting for this flame to burn inside of me for years, Chris's eyebrows raised slightly before his face lit up with a knowing grin. He reassured me that he stood firmly by my side, prepared to contribute to our relationship, and he murmured back, "I love you," with pride and something more in his voice. Unaware of the silent resolve that was growing between Chris and myself, the guests continued to speak and celebrate Olivia's announcement as the party went on. Olivia gave us a fleeting glance, her eyes glimmering with pride, confident that she had once again won. However, I made a resolute pledge to myself that this time would be different. Olivia would feel overshadowed, outwitted, and forgotten this time. I would finally be in the spotlight this time. The next morning, as I sat drinking my tepid coffee and planning our next course of action with Chris, the calm of our kitchen stood in stark contrast to the tumultuous emotional hangover still reverberating within my mind. Sunlight softly splashed upon the pale wooden table, covered with half-written vengeance scenarios, and drafts of save-the-date cards scrawled in my sloppy handwriting as it passed through the sheer white drapes. Some of these suggestions, such as planning the wedding around Olivia's birthday or intentionally misspelling her name on the invitation, were ridiculously trivial. Small gestures that made me laugh for a while, but felt empty and disappointing in the end. After reading one of my more juvenile ideas that I had written at 3 a.m, Chris smiled gently, shook his head in loving amazement, crumpled it up, and skillfully tossed it into the overflowing trash can. After hours of iterations, we eventually created something nuanced but thought-provoking and unclear. Remember the date, intended to purposefully regain the attention Olivia had so easily taken away from me, not merely to reclaim our moment. We carefully considered which day would set off the ideal emotional storm. Olivia's due date was just 1 week away, and we knew that her insatiable bordering on pathological curiosity would compel her to learn about our plans. As a result, she couldn't help but take a glance at our announcement before anybody else did. I had a wave of exhilaration and nervousness after sending the cards to the printer, and I briefly doubted myself before Chris gave me a comforting shoulder squeeze. He gently smiled while brushing a stray hair behind my ear and said, "Relax," in my ear. "She's tired of being treated this way. It is now your chance to speak last." 2 days later, the peaceful rhythm of our breakfast was interrupted by the harsh, furious ringing of my phone. Olivia's name appeared in bold, angry characters on the screen. I paused for a moment, taking courage from Chris's unwavering stare, and then I picked up the phone and carefully pressed it to my ear, preparing for the impending storm. "Are you crazy?" Olivia's voice erupted instantly, every syllable pierced with hatred as her words were entangled in incredulity and indignation. "Did you really choose that day specifically? You are aware that my due date is just 1 week away." Even though her rage was strangely pleasurable, and a sign that my well-crafted message had struck the right spot, I still pretended to be politely perplexed and spoke cautiously. "Harmless. What date do you mean by your due date exactly?" "It was precisely 9 months after your announcement, if I recall correctly." "Correct. There should be enough time to prevent any disputes." Olivia saw my ridiculous arithmetic error during the brief quiet on the line. Her due date would naturally be considerably earlier, because she had, of course, revealed her pregnancy long after the fertilization. I was aware that the error would be readily apparent, maybe eliciting some humorous remarks from our friends on my mathematical prowess, but more significantly generating interest and responses to ensure that no one could overlook my point. Olivia swiftly recovered her calm, the hatred in her voice evident, and hissed furiously, "Oh, please! You are well aware of my baby's due date, and you purposefully choose that day to spoil my special occasion. You're attempting to ruin the best moment of my life." Sabotage, I said calmly, listening to the faint shudder of real pain beneath her rage and momentarily questioning whether I had gone a bit too far this time. But then my engagement party memories came flooding back. As Olivia luxuriated in the attention she had so ruthlessly taken from me, I felt humiliated and heard vicious laughter reverberating about me. I inhaled deeply and examined myself, gathering all the courage I had suppressed for years of silent bitterness. Olivia, isn't that funny? I spoke calmly and carefully, relishing the strong sensation of control that swept over me. Who is stealing now? Who is in the spotlight? I could almost see her surprised face as the connection fell eerily silent, and I could picture the angry tears welling up in her eyes. Chris watched me closely from across the table, his eyes steady, but questioning, silently asking if I was truly comfortable with how far this had gone. Olivia had always assumed her position as the family favorite was secure, unquestionable, and never once suspected that I might dare to step out of my assigned role as passive supporter to challenge her. For a brief while, there was a heavy stillness between us, full with unspoken words, defenses, and accusations that were just out of reach and ready to break the tenuous calm. Olivia's shaky, shallow breathing betrayed the fragility she never let others see. Perhaps too late, I realized that retribution wasn't as sweet as I had thought it would be, and my heart squeezed at the sound. Olivia quickly ended the conversation, while I paused, leaving me with nothing but a void and unresolved questions. I carefully put the phone down, wondering if I had finally won the battle, or had just started one that I wasn't ready to fight, and felt the weight of my actions fall heavily on my shoulders. In the days after Olivia's irate phone call, rumors started to circulate among our relatives, dividing cousins, aunts, and uncles into opposing factions. While some vehemently supported my right to reclaim my moment, others angrily criticized my choice to hold the wedding so near Olivia's due date. Every whispered discussion seemed heavy with criticism, stress, and subliminal charges. And all of a sudden, every encounter became into a possible altercation, which left me feeling both alone and empowered. With flimsy attempts at mediation, hollow assurances, and thinly veiled requests that I just apologize and reschedule my phone was buzzing nonstop. Every word, cloaked in cheesy civility, failed to conceal its actual meaning that Olivia's sentiments should once more take precedence over mine. When Olivia publicly posted on social media about her severe stress and emotional distress, claiming it could affect her pregnancy, the fallout escalated dramatically. This brave move immediately drew waves of sympathy from family members who rushed to her side, offering her reassuring platitudes and heartfelt support. Her writings, which were full of well-chosen words meant to evoke strong emotions, quickly portrayed me as heartless, self-centered, and even cruel, solidifying her role as the hapless victim and painting me as the bad guy. However, in spite of the harsh reactions, relatives who ought to have known better kept coming in. A tremendous sense of justification drove me to obstinately stick with my choice, hoping that Olivia wouldn't overwhelm me for once. However, Rebecca explains, nothing prepared me for the call from my mother, whose gentle yet unyielding voice easily triggered decades-old insecurity, cutting straight to my core. How were you able to? She started off with a tone that was laden with guilt, subtly accusatory, and exaggerated disappointment. Olivia's pregnancy is fragile, as you are aware. How could you purposefully give her this much worry on a day so near to her due date? Even I was shocked by my own reaction and the sheer passion that went into it. So I laughed bitterly. Mom, really? I felt years of repressed rage simmering perilously near the surface as I snapped back, my voice trembling a little. I'm still the villain, even after Olivia purposefully humiliates me in front of everyone by announcing her pregnancy during my engagement party. You've always been prejudiced. Do you even realize that the line was filled with my mother's agonizing stillness, which was heavy with anguish? However, spurred by the bottled-up rage, I moved forward instead of backing down like I usually do, breaking free at last. Olivia has eclipsed every significant event in my life, and each and every time you watched in silence. I never once acknowledged my feelings. She was always your favorite and your star. I was only an idea after the fact. My mother, obviously shocked and uneasy by my infrequent outburst, said hesitantly and tremblingly, "You know that's not true. she was anxious to maintain a story in which she was innocent. Even though I've always loved you equally. Her phony assurance simply made me more resentful, which made my response harsher than I had intended. You loved me just as much. Yes, Mother, I said sarcastically, my tone rough and nasty. You sobbed when she announced her engagement and hardly blinked when I did the same. That's why you casually forgot about mine while throwing lavish dinner parties to honor each of her promotions. My feelings have never been as important as Olivia's. Don't dispute it. With every second that went by, the emotional gap between us grew wider. It was another long, agonizing quiet full of a lifetime of unspoken truths and hidden grudges. At last, my mother's voice was tiny and unsure, nearly whispering, Rebecca, I'm sorry you feel that way. I didn't want for you to feel hated, but her apology sounded hollow and inadequate, incapable of mending the decades-old scars or bridging the emotional divide. Although I knew deep down that this conversation had been required, hanging up the phone left me exhausted, exposed, and terrified. The weight of our tense relationship was bearing down on me, a long overdue admission of facts that we had both disregarded. Even Chris saw the shift, putting his arms around me tenderly every night in an attempt to comfort me, while his eyes showed signs of mounting nervousness and subtly asking me to think about letting go for the sake of harmony. Perhaps you've made your point, he said carefully in a whisper. His steady voice had a faint note of dissatisfaction one evening, suggesting that even he was feeling the effects of this continuous struggle. Maybe it's time to let it go and go on without enduring the suffering any longer. Even though I knew he meant well, and that his kind comments were the result of sincere concern, I was nonetheless deeply irritated by them. I was frustrated that even my staunchest ally, Chris, suddenly advised me to back off. Was I really supposed to keep quiet again? I have to swallow my emotions and let Olivia in again. My phone rang loudly before I could reply, breaking the tension between us, as the screen brightened with quickly arriving alerts. Olivia had once again made a dramatic and public statement in which she claimed that I had always disliked having her in our family, subtly implying a more sinister reality. Everyone, including me, was left astonished and perplexed, looking blankly at the provocative message blazing violently on the screen. After her words sent shockwaves through our family, causing frenetic conversations and endless analysis. My pulse pounded with anxiety as I frantically wondered what secret Olivia might possibly divulge that I was unaware of. A secret so potent that it threatened to shatter all my preconceived notions about my own family. Olivia's cryptic clues stoked my interest, which soon turned into an obsession that took up every free moment of my day. I was determined to learn more about our family's complex past in order to uncover the truth hidden under layers of meticulously crafted tales. I spent days going through ancient family albums, dusty boxes containing school diplomas, childhood artwork, and long-forgotten diaries that were kept in our parents' attic. Every item of memorabilia I came across revealed tidbits of information I never would have predicted. A startling pattern soon became apparent among fading photos and scribbled notes, revealing something I had completely missed my whole life. Olivia's bright charisma and easy popularity belied deep-seated concerns that had been boiling under her self-assured exterior for years. It became evident to me, as I went over our academic records and other honors, how frequently our parents had disparaged Olivia in comparison to me. Teacher-written notes on report cards and letters home always emphasizing my accomplishments, but subtly implying Olivia's difficulties. Olivia's lively personality had always seemed unwavering, but it seems that she spent a large portion of our childhood in silence, fighting feelings of inadequacy that were overshadowed by my academic achievement and the quiet discipline qualities our parents publicly praised. Olivia never realized how much their subtle comparisons had hurt my sister. I struggled with the thought that the sister I had always viewed as self-assured and favored had actually felt just as inferior and overshadowed as I had. And learning these secrets left me feeling oddly terrible. Determined to confront Olivia about this, I arranged up a meeting at her favorite cafe, a neutral location that seemed absurd considering our turbulent past. As Olivia walked in, clearly agitated and ready for a fight, I pointed clumsily to the seat across from me, trying to seem humorous. Olivia calmed down. No snatching of the limelight today, I swear. Just two dysfunctional sisters enjoying coffee. I tried to be funny, but Olivia rolled her eyes and laughed harshly, weakening my attempt. Excellent. Sincerely, M2 is preparing for drama today. She let out a sigh, the tinge of her typical sarcasm, offering a momentary but welcome respite from the tension that still pervaded our relationship. I suppose you would find it humorous since drama is my area of expertise. Beneath the layers of bitterness and miscommunication that had recently characterized our conversations, I felt a glimmer of the old sisterly banter and smiled faintly. It's funny how we always thought the worst of one another, I said softly as I looked her in the eye. While going through old family belongings, I discovered certain things that shocked me. Olivia's eyebrows furrowed as I began to carefully lay out the painful facts that Heidi had revealed, outlining the subtle but ongoing comparisons our parents had unintentionally made that shaped our ideas of ourselves and each other. Olivia was fascinated but hesitant. Initially, listening in silence, Olivia's countenance was a complex blend of humiliation, despair, and rage, all of which were obviously at odds with one another and threatened to overpower her carefully maintained poise. Olivia's shields finally gave down a little, and she leaned forward, her voice tinged with unvarnished honesty. "You don't understand, Rebecca," she said sourly, her eyes glimmering with hardly contained tears. "You have always had skill, knowledge, and respect from everyone, including Chris, who genuinely loves you. Being entertaining, well-liked, and the person that everyone liked at gatherings was all I ever had. However, I knew in my heart that I would never be able to compare to you in any significant manner. I was shocked by the intensity of real suffering underlying her statements, which made me reevaluate my preconceptions about her ostensibly easy existence. Olivia." I let out a little sigh, fighting to maintain my composure as guilt instead of victory suddenly overcame me. Olivia interjected, shaking her head fiercely, and her voice vibrating with unfiltered anger. "All this time, I thought you purposefully overshadowed me because you enjoyed seeing me struggle," she said. "No. It wasn't about you that I announced my pregnancy at your celebration. It was my frantic, self-centered endeavor to be unique and to have a success of my own that no one could disparage in comparison to yours." "Horrible, huh?" I responded with ironic humor to cover up my inner weakness, and I chuckled bitterly as the ridiculousness of our lifetime miscommunication suddenly became apparent. We are both aware that insecurities are our family's expertise. Perhaps we need to give our parents credit for making treatment a permanent requirement. Olivia gave a sincere, if little grin, as she sighed deeply and reclined in her chair, obviously worn out by the weight of our discoveries. Rebecca said in a low voice, "I don't know if we can ever fully move past this, Rebecca," in a somber and thoughtful tone. "There have been too many years of animosity between us." The reality in her statement made my heart sink, and I instantly realized how pointless my retaliation had been. The joy I had expected was replaced with a sobering realization of the emotional price we had both paid. I gave her a hesitant nod, comprehending her hesitancy, and wondering if the harm we had caused could be repaired or buried. Beneath our resentment was the tenuous prospect of recovery. Olivia's face changed suddenly before I could reply. Darkening a little, her eyes narrowing suddenly with passion, her voice falling conspiratorially. "Rebecca," she said warily, her tone tinged with apprehension, "you ought to be aware of something else as well. Mom always knew this. Something about you." She skipped uneasily and never shared my emotions. Olivia's cryptic statements caused me to become immediately uneasy and anxious for answers, making me doubt everything I had ever thought about my family and myself. I felt a sharp rise in confusion and fear. Sleep remained impossible in the days after Olivia's disturbing disclosure, as an unrelenting dread twisted my stomach into painful knots and pushed me in the direction of the awkward conversation I knew I could no longer avoid. As I approached the familiar porch in the evening, I picked a time when I knew my mother would be by herself, sipping tea quietly in the soft glow of her favorite reading lamp. Anxiety tightened around me, like a heavy cloak, making each step up the stairs harder than the last, weighted by years of unspooling resentments and newly discovered uncertainties. My mother answered the door slowly, obviously aware of the seriousness of my unexpected visit. Her eyes were cautious and apprehensive, but they couldn't hide the intense maternal tenderness beneath her tense face. She motioned me inside, and the door closed softly behind us, the click resonating through the house with a finality that unnerved us both, and meant that whatever secrets lay between us were about to permanently change our family. My pulse was racing as I sat across from her, and my bravery wavered for a second before regaining it and asking the question that had been bothering me for days. My voice cracked a little beneath the intensity. "Olivia implied that you've kept something significant about me a secret all of my life, Mom. Tell me what's happening, please." My mother was obviously struggling with a lifetime of grief and shame, as her eyes immediately filled with tears, her shoulders quivering slightly as she gripped her teacup hard, her knuckles becoming white from the emotional strain. At last, she drew a trembling breath, her voice weak and frail as she spoke quietly, picking words carefully as if they were all too heavy. "Rebecca, you had a twin sister at birth, a lovely and ideal little girl we called Elizabeth. She died soon after, leaving a hole in our hearts from which we never fully healed. It was impossible for me to properly register her words, let alone comprehend the implications that lay behind them, as my breath caught in my throat and my astonished disbelief mixed uncomfortably with the anguish and uncertainty that instantly overcame me. My mother persisted shakily, making a valiant effort to keep everything under control, but it was obvious that she was battling with the reality that she had concealed for decades under layers of tactful quiet. We were almost ruined by the loss. Rebecca's absence tormented your father and me, and we thought we would never be able to get over our grief. Olivia restored hope and pleasure to our family when she entered our lives through adoption. However, the thought of her ever feeling alienated was too much for us to handle. We told ourselves it was best for you both, so we kept the truth from you." The room swung slightly about me as the realization of this fact sent a shockwave through my heart, leaving me feeling lightheaded and confused. I was overcome with grief for a sister I had never knew existed, and sympathy for the mother whose unseen suffering influenced so many of our decisions. But before I could say anything, we were both shocked by a sudden cry from behind. We turned swiftly to see Olivia standing motionless in the corridor, her face white, her emotions contorted with a mix of anguish, amazement, and beginning understanding. Olivia had been whispering hoarsely the entire time, her voice laden with sadness and terrible disbelief, tears already silently running down her cheeks. "My fears weren't unique to me. You also didn't tell me about this. You gave me the impression that Rebecca detested me because I was just insufficient. But in fact, I was always attempting to fill the impossibly large gap left by Elizabeth." In a desperate attempt to win Olivia's forgiveness, my mother wept gently and reached out to her. However, Olivia flinched back, shaking her head angrily, overcome by a lifetime of abruptly redefining ties and emotions. Instead, she turned to face me, her eyes beseeching me to understand, silently pleading with me to affirm that she was still my sister. Our parents' well-meaning deceit had unintentionally created emotional isolation. Tears obstructing my eyes, I approached Olivia and gently grasped her shaking hand. The touch of her palm felt both familiar and somehow unfamiliar, as if we were now seeing each other fully. "Olivia," I said, my voice full of sincere passion, "you've been my sister forever. I apologize. We both misunderstood one another for a very long time." She squeezed my hand tightly and nodded softly. The shaky prospect of reconciliation hasn't yet been authentically infused into our hesitant embrace. Even yet, we both understood that it would take time and attention for our shared wounds to completely heal. Our mother, who was obviously divided between relief and guilt, as she watched us, sobbed quietly, thankful that her daughters may find peace, but yet heartbroken by the harm caused by decades of silence. In the weeks that followed, Chris and I carefully rethought our wedding preparations, deciding to recognize our true love and celebrate our own personalities rather than being driven by competitiveness or retaliation. Each of us fought to get our save-the-date back. Spotlight theft, which had been used as a weapon against Olivia, now represented my freedom from familial concerns and my bold entry into a future characterized by individual authenticity rather than continual comparison. At the last fitting for my wedding gown, I stood silently next to Olivia, our reflections blending together in the mirror. I was surprisingly at ease after realizing how intricately self-worth and family competition interact to shape each of us in both obvious and subtle ways. Our tentative, wary but hopeful hug was a realization that in spite of our disagreements, miscommunications, and emotional wounds, our sisterly tie was sincere and strong, able to withstand even the most trying circumstances. When I honestly thought back on this path, I realized that reconciliation was neither straightforward nor comprehensive. It took constant work and vulnerability tolerance for flaws, and the guts to face unpleasant realities head-on in order to be really forgiven. However, I knew that we had made the first important steps toward healing when we stood together as sisters bound by secrets, wounds, and at last, true understanding. We had moved past our shared past and into an uncertain but hopeful future, which caused everyone, including myself, to think carefully about their own lives and unresolved relationships.